So I thought what we would do is go through another one of the handout org reviews. We can do it together. You can just kind of chime in and just refresh ourselves what we're looking for and why. And so if you brought those with you and you want to mark them up, you can do that. We're looking at the one that talks about educational programs for schools. And if you're not seeing my screen, then hopefully you can just click on it somewhere and grab it, or you can just look at the handout itself. Let me see. All right, so what is it that we're looking for on page 1, generally?
Contributions and grants and program service revenue.
Right, line 8 versus line 9. In this particular organization, what do we notice?
$13 million in
That their revenue is way higher than their contributions.
Yeah, that some 90% of their revenue is coming from program service revenue, which means they charge for stuff. And they're only getting $41,000 in contributions total. So when I look at this, at least just from this page, I'm going, well, gosh, do they need my $50 or my $500, or do they do perfectly fine by having their model of being charged for stuff? So that's the first sort of warning signal that I look at there. So page 2, we're looking for what is it that they do and how effective are they. And so this agency provides educational programs in marine ecology, 30,000 students annually. They spent $9 million. Oddly enough, they left the revenue section blank over here on the right. That means they didn't fill out the form correctly, because that's where they're supposed to match up their program service revenue with their program service expenses. So if they made money by doing that educational program, then that should show up in the revenue section. So they didn't quite fill out the form right, but we'll forgive them. But I can do some division and say, how much are they spending per student in order for the student to go to this school. And so I take 9 million and divide by 30,000, and I get what, 300 is the cost per student. But I can't quite tell from this, how long a student is there or what they're getting out of it. So then I go to the director page and look at salaries. And what do we notice about the executive director?
$360,000 plus an additional 64 in additional.
So he's doing pretty good. He's making $420,000, working 40 hours a week. And then there's a couple others that seem to be pretty well in line, although the camp director is in the 125 range. So that has me a little concerned. So here's where it's saying tuition program. So this tuition should have been on that page 2 under revenue, but they charge tuition for their school, and they only brought in $41,000 in grants in this particular year. They sold some stuff. That's where this other comes from. So they had probably camp T-shirts or baseball caps or something like that. And then we look at their functional expenses. And what do we want to do on this page? Remember, we want to go to the bottom, line 25.
80-20-20, or 80-10-10.
We want to look at the 80-10-10. Now, in this case, they're at 0% fundraising. Why? Because they don't need to raise funds. They charge for stuff. Okay? But their management expenses is over the 10%. And so that's a concern. So on the extra credit side, if I look at page 11 at the balance sheet, then I start looking at their assets. And so when I look at their assets, just what I look at, they have $1 million in non-bearing, interest-bearing cash in their checking account. They have another $2 million in notes receivable. So they've lent money to somebody or some organization, which is a little odd. If we dug into it, it could be a loan to the director or somebody on staff. And then we go to the line that says, line 11, investments in publicly traded securities. So that's money in the stock market. And that's $3 million. So they have $4 million that's available to spend. And what were their contributions for the year? 41,000. So in essence, they have 100 years worth of contributions already in the bank. Okay. So I had a student submit this to me as their grant proposal. This organization is the Catalina Science Camp. So it's all the students, California students that are required to go to Catalina during 8th grade or 6th grade or whatever grade and attend science camp. And this student said, hey, I was impacted by this week. It made me want to become a scientist, and I want to be able to donate to them. But it's not an organization that needs our donations. It may be doing good things, although it's collecting a lot of money and seems like it's overcharging. But I encourage that student to go out and say, okay, so what are some other organizations that impact people in need and that encourage people to develop careers in science? And so he and I worked together. We found an organization in Santa Ana that identifies 20 kids from the inner city and that can't afford college but seem to be really smart, and gives them laptops and gives them SAT prep training and helps them fill out college applications. And you look at their track record, and they've sent dozens of kids to Stanford, MIT, Berkeley, and all this. So, completely changed lives for those individuals. And it relies exclusively on donations. And so I said, well, look at these two things compared to each other. Look at the impact that this thing is having on people in need and how much more impact they could have if they had a few more dollars. Because they were spending maybe $1,500 per student, but changing their lives forever. And so we ended up giving to that particular organization. Questions on that? Starting to get a sense of what's going on there. There was an emailed question about gifts in kind. So let me go to an organization that you're not allowed to use. Hey, who just joined?
Ryan just joined.
I don't even have him on my list. Was he here in either of the first 2 weeks?
I was in VCC, yeah.
Oh, okay, got it. So you're doing a makeup.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Welcome,
Elizabeth just joined.
Elizabeth. Welcome.
I sent an email in, Steve.
All right, so I go to and make sure you're not trying to sign in while I'm teaching class, because otherwise we kick each other out and I get upset. So I pick the organization. I go down to the green bar that says Forms 990. I bring up the Form 990, and I get to see what's going on with that particular organization. So in here, initially, it looks like, wow, they're bringing in $14 million in contributions and grants. And I don't make you look at the revenue page just because I don't want to overwhelm you guys with a whole bunch of stuff. But if I scroll down to the revenue page here, you see this line G that says non-cash contributions included in lines 1A through 1F. So out of that 14 million, 5 million are non-cash contributions. So a lot of food banks and organizations like that, where the local grocery store or Target or Walmart donates stuff, these organizations have to come up with a way to value that stuff. And they can do it as simple as, hey, 50 cents a pound, I'm just making something up, as long as I account for it. So in this particular case, they brought in $5 million worth of stuff, and I can't tell from this page what that stuff is, but if I look at their expenses, then I can see that they gave away grants and assistance to individuals of $3 million, and if I dug into that a little bit, that could also be the value of the food or stuff that they provided to that particular individual. And sometimes, if it's a thrift store or something, they might bring in more than they bring out. So how does this organization look? It's a little heavy on the fundraising. They're spending $1.5 million in this thing called advertising and promotion. $1.2 million in fundraising. Did you guys get a chance to read that, to watch that video that I sent out?
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that? So the way that some charities do fundraising is they hire an organization to do fundraising for them. And it's sort of like fundraising by commission. And an organization would say, well, hey, if I get $5,000, that's better than getting nothing, even though the fundraiser collected $7,500 and kept $2,500 of it. Because the nonprofit's saying, well, hey, I got my $5,000. So when you're giving to an organization, you wanted to not necessarily based on who called you. You want to make sure you're sending checks directly to the organization, so that there's not some middleman collecting a fee for that. And then you might encourage that organization to figure out how to do fundraising on its own for less than 10% of the cost. Okay. Did we answer the question on gifts in kind and non-cash contributions? So there's nothing wrong with it at all. The question is if 95% of if they're a food bank and 95% of their business is bringing in food and giving away food, do they need cash? What do they need cash for? Presumably they still need some cash, so it's okay that's a large percentage. All right, starting to get a feel for these things? Did anybody look at an organization and you saw the 990 and you saw something you didn't understand that you want me to look at with the group?
I had a question. I was looking at some organizations for veterans, and I know you said we couldn't use 990 EZs, but I came across 990 PFs, and so I didn't know what those were.
A PF is a private foundation. A private foundation means that some percentage is that they have sort of a primary donor or primary group of donors. And again, that's not all bad. Some private foundations, your donations aren't actually tax deductible, so you have to watch out for that. Or they don't really want your organization. Like I had done some research and found an organization called the Skoll Foundation. I loved what they were doing, and I said, "Well, I want to choose your organization." They said, "We don't want your money. We've got this billionaire who funds it." So it's like, oh, okay. Keep up the good work. Yes. What's the name of the organization?
There was two. There was Wishes for Warriors and Wave Projects, both out of San Diego for veterans.
We'll just pick one and see if we can find it. Don't go online while I'm online. All right, so sometimes an organization like Giving University will probably end up being classified as a private foundation because so much of its so much of the money comes from just a small few organization donations. This is like a PFEZ, isn't it? They have the income. They have assets. I just want to see if they show expenses. Sorry for the art chart if it's jumping around for you. Yeah, it's a little tough to find all the stuff, but I wouldn't necessarily object to it if you talk to them and ask them why they ended up failing and ended up being a private foundation. And the other thing you can ask them for is an income statement so that you can understand how much is going to fundraising and stuff. I don't see it on here. Their expenses are legal occupancy and others. Yeah, it's sort of an easy form to it. But if you're passionate about it and you can find out if they spend money on fundraising or if they're funded primarily by one organization, then I can probably get it passed. Or if you do an analysis on some other organization, just so I know you've gone through the work, and then you say, but this is the organization I really want to donate to. Sometimes we do that. Anybody else? Opportunity for free assistance. All right, let me go back to the slides. Okay, so hopefully in your email you got the organization review document. It's pretty straightforward. four main sections. What is the organization? What does it do? What's the impact it's having? What did you learn from the 990s? We kind of want to know why you picked it, and we'll either ask you that if it's not on the form, and what your future involvement might be. So I've lost a student in the past by saying, how dare we decide that some organizations have more impact than others, but we reserve that right, and we tell you what we're looking at. So the board is looking for, first of all, is the organization serving people in need, and is it using the funds effectively? Is it not a pass-through? Is it not an organization that primarily charges for stuff? Is not an organization that's primarily getting its money from government grants? Does it align with your passion? And then the board members will vote. Majority wins. Sometimes we'll ask for additional information. So you'll do your presentation, and if I'm the person listening in, I can usually tell what the board's going to ask, so I can get that ahead of time and have you resubmit with that extra information. There is a short list of organizations that are on the exclusion list. These are great organizations. We love them. They pass all of our tests, but we sort of had, 10 or more people already do these organizations. And one of the things that we want to do as an organization is learn about other organizations. So if you had picked one of these four, I apologize. You'll have to find an organization that's similar and present some other organization other than these four. But other than that, it's pretty wide open. No dogs, no cats, no oceans, no seals, no political, no gun control.
How about if it was a thing for returning veterans that were disabled veterans? There's an organization that does
Yeah,
guide dogs for them, though.
that's fine, as long as it's people in need. We have done guide dogs for the blind.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Because it's not, the organization is not for the dogs.
Right.
Yeah. Questions on that? Again, if you have an individual question, please email me or Michael Ann, and we'll get you an answer. I see Shaylee, you're there. Are you alone? Are you muted? All right, let me quickly just go through the list of people that I don't see here, and maybe if in case I missed you. Ronald, Willie, Olivia, Chano, Kirsty Boys, Lindsay, Curtis, Alexis, Steve Rutenbar, Diana Sanchez, Teresa Sester, Leslie. Okay, so we'll close off attendance at that point. So, over the next 2 weeks, your objective is to find an organization, write up a review, and present that review. So week 5 will be when that reviews will be done. We may or may not do all of them on week 5 because of the size, because of the size of this group. But please, that's 2 weeks from today. So please email your reviews and attach the 990 to Michael Ann at givinguniversity@cox.net, and she'll collect those and forward them to the board. And then plan on doing a 2 to 3 minute oral presentation, and be prepared to answer questions by the other students and by me and by any other board members that happen to show up that week.
How long are the oral presentations?
2 to 3 minutes. So if you want to pair up,
Did we send those to?
givingyversi@cox.net. Same email as the Guide Star. If you want to pair up, you are welcome to pair up, but the two of you need to present two different organizations. And so what sometimes happens is two people will say, well, we looked at these two organizations that do similar things because we wanted to figure out which one was a higher impact. And we looked at this one, we liked it. We looked at this one, we didn't like it. And so we want both of our money to go to this other organization. And that's great because we like to hear no's. If you end up finding a no and end up doing a second organization, when you do your presentation, we want to also hear about the no and why it was a no so that we can learn about that. If you end up and you do all your preparation, you end up with a no, you can present that no and then either choose somebody else's organization or come back a couple weeks later with an organization that you would recommend. So again, if there's two of you and you want to pair up, if you're nervous about oral presentations or the numbers thing is freaking you out, then pair up with somebody but just make sure that you're doing all of the work for two different organizations and both presenting at that point. Questions? All right. So we're now moving into week 3. So what we're going to do now is have you grab a piece of paper or your phone, your virtual piece of paper, and I want you to come up with 5 to 10 different reasons on why people are reluctant to be generous. And if you want to do it in small groups, just mute yourself if you want to do it. But it's good exercise on your own. I know, none of you are not generous, so you're always thinking about somebody else. But if you in the past were not generous, then why? What was the biggest reason? If your parents aren't generous, why not? If your neighbors are not generous, why not? If random people you can think about, try to come up with 5 to 10 good reasons that are different on why people are not generous. Ready, go. All right, so I'm ready to create my list here. Let me start by randomly picking somebody here. All right. Let's see who's here. Dave?
Yeah. Well, Steve and I were actually, Kamana Pauly and I were actually talking about this kind of the other day. And here's just a few reasons that I came up with. One was the character issue. And some people, without the right training or, exposure, you can just grow up selfish. That's one thing.
So what would that
Another thing I
person?
had was that sometimes people just feel that, well, it won't do any good anyway.
Okay.
They're kind of fatalistic.
So go.
Another,
Hang on.
what's that?
Hang on. So the first person that you talked about, the character person, what would their response be if you said, "Why aren't you more generous?"
They would probably say, well, what do you mean? I really think that there's a whole world out there that they might feel that they are generous. I remember talking to one guy one time, and he said, ever since I was young, I was taught by my parents to give, and I said, man, that's outstanding. He says, yeah, I've always given 1% of my income to the poor. And so it's just a values thing.
Okay.
So I think the response might be, well, what do you mean?
Okay. So maybe if in their case we'd have to say, well, what's stopping you from being more generous? And maybe they think, so I'm generous enough. Would be their response? Okay.
Sure.
I get it.
Okay. A second one that I said was there's people that say, well, the world's so full of problems, no matter what I do, it does no good.
Good. Okay.
This problem's the size of a government.
Yeah.
What good am I? And I think there's a lot of people like that.
Okay. Let me pick on somebody else here. Sarah?
Okay, so what I said was people who feel like they don't have enough for themselves, so why give away when they don't have enough themselves?
Okay. I can't afford to give any of what I have up.
Yeah, and then kind of along the same lines, but like it's not enough to make a difference.
Good.
Or like I have such a small amount, so I'm just not going to give it.
Good. Okay, thanks. Let's see, who else? Blaine, are you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking people that are greedy.
So a greedy person, if you said to a greedy person, why don't you give more? What's that greedy person going to say?
I would probably relate right back to what Sarah said. Maybe they don't think they have enough themselves.
Well, let's say they do, but they're greedy.
Yeah.
What do we say? What's the typical selfish rich person going to say when you say, why aren't you more generous?
I don't know, maybe they'd say maybe they need to work harder or...
Okay. So...
I work for mine.
Yeah, exactly. I worked for mine.
I work for mine. I deserve to keep my own. Good. All right. Who's got one that wasn't one of these five?
I have one. I've been unaware and not knowing. You mentioned maybe probably going to like a third world where you're exposed to a different level of poverty, versus what the type of poverty that we here.
Okay, so I don't know who I would give to. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
You're echoing. I don't understand what you're saying.
Mute yourself. I'm saying, would that person respond by saying, I don't know who I would give to? Have I lost a remote? Oh, it's in there. Make sure that you're muted. Blaine, I'm going to mute you. Because if you put yourself on speaker, then that's where we get that echo. Okay. All right. Who else has got one that wasn't on that we haven't talked about yet?
I've heard some folks say that I'd like to give, but my spouse doesn't want to give.
Interesting. My hands are tied.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Go ahead.
I was thinking another one could be like time, like people don't feel like they have enough time to give, like they have a busy schedule and they can't fit it in.
Not enough time to be able to write a check?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, if you dig into that one a little bit, that's that doesn't last very long. All right, who else?
People that haven't seen an organization that inspires them. They don't
Okay.
like any opportunities they've seen.
Good. I haven't found an organization worthy of my gifts.
I have another. This is Shaylee.
Go for it.
There's a trust issue.
Yeah. You don't trust the people, or you don't trust the charity?
What are they going to do with my money or whatnot?
All right. So is it I don't trust this person, or I don't trust this organization?
It could be either.
Okay. Yeah.
Or related to that, that they've given in the past and got burned.
Yeah.
Find out where their money went to with a bunch of charlatans or something like that.
Yeah, that happens a lot. My we tried the freeway off ramp thing a couple of times, and we're coming back from Costco and get to the freeway off ramp, and somebody's begging, and so we reach into our Costco bag and we give this guy our entire a bag full of apples, and the next day we get to the off ramp and we see a pile of apples sitting next to the tree. It's like, okay, that's not going to work for me.
Or he has a sign, apples, 3 for a dime.
That's okay. That's entrepreneurship. I can accept that. It depends on what he does with the dime, I suppose. All right, so let's go through my list, because what we want to do is be able to respond to each of these major objections. And once we've gone through my list and talked through the responses, then if there's one that you don't feel like we've covered, then circle that and we'll talk about it. So, very common. I can't even put food on the table. How can I think about generosity? I see that guy on the corner every week. I think he's wearing a Rolex. He probably makes more money than I do. I see that guy on the corner every week. I think he's a drunk. If I give him money, he's just going to go buy alcohol. I need to save for a rainy day. What if I lose my job next week? So that's sort of the fear aspect to it. Half my paycheck already goes to the government, and they're supposed to take care of the poor. This one we've covered. I heard Bill Gates gave away $1 billion. I make $500 a week. What's my $50 compared to $1 billion? There are plenty of poor people here in the United States. Why should I send money to the poor people in Africa? I just don't trust charities. There are so many crooks out there. I worked hard to earn this money. I deserve to keep it for myself. So a lot of the ones that you guys came up with are here. And I don't want to give to him because he will become dependent on the charity. So let's kind of go through each of these guys. And how do we respond to somebody that says, I can't even put food on the table?
God will provide. I know.
You could. I mean, the real question is, how true is this statement?
Some people don't even have a table.
Yeah, do you know what sort of the definition? Do you know what do you know what the worldwide definition of rich is? You are rich if you have 3 pairs of shoes. Okay, that puts you in the top 20% of the world. So a lot of people look at, I can't put food on the table, but what food are they putting on the table? What else are they buying? Because poor here is a lot different than poor in a lot of other places. So, is it really food, or is it, I'd have to give up 2 or 3 of my Starbucks each day in order to give. So, yeah, I mean, there are starving students. There are people that are unemployed. I'm not going after those people, but that's a very small percentage of people in the United States. So we'll talk about finances in week 6 or so, and kind of dig in a little bit on personal finances. If you're absolutely in a position where money is super tight, then start thinking about your time and your talents and what you can do to be generous in those areas. And think about what you plan to do when your situation changes. So if you're out of a job, what are you going to do once you get a job? Are you going to end up in that what if I lose my job next week category, and you're still hoarding? It's an interesting Bible verse. It says, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse so there may be food in my house. Test me on this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be enough room to store it. And the reason I bring up this verse is, not necessarily that you feel like it applies to you or you want to dig into all the pieces of it, but this phrase that says, test me in this, this is the only time in the whole Bible where God's quoted as saying, test me in this. And what he says is, I dare you to try me and start giving and see if you don't get some sort of floodgates of blessing out of it. So just something for you to think about. It's a proverb: a generous person will prosper. Anyone who gives water will receive a flood in return. Flood in a good way, I assume. All right. If I see that guy on the corner every week, I think he's wearing a Rolex. He probably makes more money than I do. So how do we respond to the person that says, I'm not generous because all the guys on the street corners wear Rolexes?
He must live in Beverly Hills himself. I've never seen that.
I think that kind of coincides with the same, the same why should I give to people in Africa, because we got people that are in need here. That's one guy that we see here. That's not the I think that's something that is really eye-opening about these courses, is finding out, you know, the truth. If we truly are ignorant to the fact of what, you know, what the rest of the world is like,
Yeah.
I think that's it's more just enlightening. It's, you know, it's not just that guy in the corner that we're talking about.
Right.
We're talking about
There and what you'll find is there are a class of people that are homeless by choice. It's just what they've chosen to do. There are certainly a class of people that have mental illness or crisis or something, and you know they're stuck in that situation. But there are a set of people that this is how they've decided to live, which is beg and eat and beg and eat and just, you know, live on the Santa Ana River and kind of do that lifestyle by choice. So you kind of have to have discernment. But the point I want to make here is, if you don't trust the guy on the street corner, don't give to the guy on the street corner. Okay, you can't give to everybody. Our goal here is to have you find things that you are passionate about and give in that area. Now, if you're passionate about the homeless and you want to work directly with the homeless, then, you know, that's great. If you're passionate about the homeless and you can find an organization that's, you know, what they specialize in and they understand all the nuances of that culture and how to best impact people's lives, even better. You can join in with that organization. But don't be guilted into helping somebody just because he's holding up a sign. If you are generous, then be generous in the areas that you're passionate about. I see that guy on the street corner every week. I think he's a drunk. If I give him money, he's just going to go buy alcohol. So how do we respond to this objection?
I see it pretty much the same way, Steve. Just don't give to that guy. You know, find an organization or something else that you're passionate about.
What if this guy's really hungry?
Yeah, just give money.
Or give him food. Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Or a gift card.
Yeah.
McDonald's card, something.
I do that. I have little $5 Del Taco gift cards in my car. And some people will say Del Taco is not necessarily the most nutritious, you know, meal, but you know, you can find nutrition there if you order correctly.
Yeah.
You know, and that gives them food if they need food. So find a small gift card for a place that does not serve alcohol. So it's hard to do just the grocery store or something like that. Yeah, so if that's a passion for you, you can try to go buy the food and hand them the food, but that's a lot of work on your part. So keep little gift cards around. I need to save for a rainy day. What if I lose my job? So one of the things I want you guys to think about is, would you rather live in a self-centered world or would you rather live in a generous world? So if you lose your job next week, you become somebody in need of generosity. But in a generous world, it's not a big deal. If everybody is self-centered and self-focused, you know, then all of a sudden, you know, you have to have this attitude. But the more people that we can get to be thinking about, hey, when you're in the position to be a giver, give. When you're in a position where you need to ask, and be thinking about it that way. Half my paycheck already goes to the government, and they're supposed to take care of the poor. So how do we respond to that particular objection?
Asking how that's working for him so far.
Good answer. So, how well is the government doing on taking care of the poor? Are they solving the problem? Or is the government just sort of working on the symptom? You know, so that's one thing. Other thing is, what's our definition of generosity? Anybody have it committed to memory or have it nearby?
If you're required to do it, it's not being generous.
That's right. So freely giving or sharing things we value for the benefit of others. Half your paycheck goes to the government. You're not doing that freely. You're doing that because you have to. So if the government is doing a really good job at taking care of the poor, then what? Find some other area that's in need of generosity. That's not held. That's not doing by where the government's not doing a fantastic job at solving the problem. So I'm not going to get political. If you think that the government's doing a great job, then that's fine. Then there are other places of people in need that are not handled by a really good government agency. Sounds like the Department of Veterans Affairs seems to be something that this group wants to think about. How's that Veterans Affairs group doing in solving the problems of returning veterans? Yeah, so just pick an area that's not covered by a government program. And don't use this as an excuse to not be generous, because that's not your generosity. That's your government stealing from you. I heard Bill Gates gave away $1 billion and I make $500 a week. Even if I give 10%, what difference is my $50 compared to $1 billion? So we had several of you respond with this or bring it up. How do we respond to this person who thinks this way?
If everybody in the country gave $50, that would be 300 million times 50, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if we take away children and non-workers and round way down and say 100 million wage earners, if 100 million wage earners give away $50, then how much money is that? Any math majors?
5 billion.
5 billion. Now, how often can Bill Gates give away $1 billion? Okay.
I don't know what his last tally is, but I would imagine you could probably do it at least 10 times a year.
Not per year. He does not make that much money that quickly. His net worth is that high, but his income is not that high. So he would run out if he did it very often. How many weeks in a row could he do that? He'd be poor after a while. But the collective America, if you just think about the United States, could easily be donating $5 billion a week. And we're going to talk about next week when we talk about poverty. We're going to talk about what impact that amount of money could have to fight poverty specifically. So if 200 million Americans give $50, that's $10 billion a week. $1 billion doesn't cover the needs, and you personally need to think about whether you should be giving, whether or not anybody else gives. Are you willing to freely give up things you value, regardless of whether there are rich people around the corner or in Seattle that have more than you have? So be thinking about that. I don't know if this was on my first page or not. The government gives away $1 billion in foreign aid. What difference is my $50? So let's talk about how foreign aid works. Okay, we may have touched on this once already. If I give $100 in taxes, how much of that 100 is available to go to foreign aid? Well, the government has to run itself, so it takes its middleman cut. So your $100 may become $80. If the government sends $80 to Uganda, who are they sending it to?
Government. Uganda,
They're sending it to the government of Uganda. What's the government of Uganda going to do with it?
Take their fees, taxes.
In some cases, they're going to buy Rolls Royces. In other cases, they're just going to be able to run their government. Okay? So by the time it gets to the people in need, half of it's gone. So if you are passionate about being able to give, it just becomes a government program when it gets done through foreign aid. It doesn't get into solving a problem. So find organizations that are actually transforming, and we'll talk about economic transformation next week when we go through poverty. So that's a fun class to kind of think through. So your $50 given well could mean more to a poor family than what some foreign government's trying to do. Find an organization that's giving in the right way. There are plenty of poor people here in the United States. Why should I send money to the poor people in Africa? How do we respond to that?
I think you can do a lot of good here in America as well as over in Africa. One person can give to one place and somebody else can give to another place.
That's right. I typically always answer this question with a question. So, do you send money to help the poor in the United States, or are you just using this as an excuse? Again, find something you're passionate about and give in those areas. If you have a passion for the poor in the United States, find an organization that's helping the poor in the United States and give to them. Don't feel guilty about not giving to the poor in Africa, if that's not your thing. Now, I'm going to show you some statistics that make Africa unique next week, but there are plenty of other poor people in poor countries. Be generous in that area. I just don't trust charities. There are so many crooks out there. So your video assignment this weekend is going to be a really fun video that talks about an organization called, Breast Cancer Society of America and Children's Cancer Society. And just because they have those names, you think it's going to a good cause, but it's not. So, how do we respond to somebody that thinks this way?
Tell them to do their research so they can find an organization that isn't, misusing the funds.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yes, there are crooks, but that doesn't mean they're all crooks. And part of this course is to help you determine, which organizations are not being crooked. So
that's what I was going to say next, Steve. Is you need to tell them to take the Giving University course, right?
That's right. Hopefully, by the end of this course, you will be one of our advocates. Yeah, so I'll send out that CNN video over the weekend. Yep, there are crooks. There are, in some cases, we have found organizations where they did great things for 10 years, and then all of a sudden, things went south. And so it's a continual observation. It's not a one-time observation. Learn to give in such a way that they use your money the way you want them to. So we used to have a whole section on this, and I've taken it out of the course. But whatever you write in the memo of your check, by law, that organization has to apply those funds based on what you've earmarked in that memo field. So if an organization has 5 different missions, but only one of them looks good to you, then write that one down in the memo field and say, I want my money. I want to feel good about my money. I want my money to go to that particular thing, or that particular country, or this particular group of people. Giving University doesn't like to really build buildings unless maybe it's an orphanage, but and so if an organization does a lot of building of buildings and we want to give that organization, then we'll specify for something besides building a building. So I'll send you this video over the weekend. I worked hard to earn this money. I deserve to keep it for myself. How do we respond to this person? Whether people say it or not, this really is sort of the #1 American response.
There are other people working just as hard as you and not making any money.
Yeah, so grab your piece of paper, and we're going to have you do another little exercise. I want you to write down the top 3 to 5 key reasons that have given you the ability to earn money that you work hard for.
Repeat that.
3 to 5 top reasons.
3 to 5
that
top
give you
reasons.
The ability to earn.
Yeah. What are the 3 top reasons that have gotten you to the point where, as an adult, you have the ability to earn money? So spend a few minutes on that.
As an adult to earn money.
The top factor that led to your ability to earn money. So who thinks they have a #1 reason? Anybody brave?
I would say luck is the #1 reason. Luck being born in a good country, and also what each individual has to do that.
All right, so let's break up luck into, what was the first thing you said?
Where you happen to be born.
Where you were born. Good. Where you were born. All right, what's another #1 or #2? Somebody else.
Health.
Education.
Yeah, health in the sense of
Ability to work.
how healthy were you when? How healthy you were as a young child. Because if you were not healthy as a young child, you would not be able to earn money. Another one, somebody.
I said the relationships that I have and the connections that created.
What's the most important relationship?
When I was thinking of this, I was thinking of my family relationship, but it also gave me relationships with church where I grew up. So I would say it's familial, it's people helping each other.
Yeah, and I would go a step further than that and say basically who your parents were is in the top 3 reasons of how your ability to be successful. If you had lousy parents or poor parents or disinterested parents, far different than parents who invested in you. Okay, I heard somebody say education, and really it's early education. Your ability to earn typically is not based, once you get to some point, yes, if you want to be a doctor, then you need a doctor's education. But just general education, and your ability to go to grade school, we take for granted in the United States. But in a lot of other countries, they have some really weird rules. Like you have to be wealthy enough to buy a uniform in order to go to school, and that's only 10% of the population. Well, what's the point of having a uniform if all it does is restrict the number of people that can do it? So, as you look at this list, I believe that working hard does not make the top 5. That there are a lot of people that work hard but can't earn a living because of where they were born, or their situation, or they are sick. I believe that a lot of people earn money and yet don't really work hard. So if we go back to that top 5 list, though, what I want you to write down is how much control did I have over those things? How much control did you have over where you were born? And I know David said the sort of luck kind of thing, but you had no control over where you were born. You have no control over who your parents were. You had no control over how much health care you received in the first 5 years of your life. You had no control over which elementary school you went to, or whether you got, an early education. And yet you're patting yourself on the back by saying, I'm working hard so I get to keep this money. If I take a poor person, in India who's, diseased, how much control did they have on being born in India, or being born to poor parents, or not having access to health care, or not having access to education? So when you really dig into this, you don't deserve to keep your money any more than they deserve to not have money. So please, think through that. And again, if we live in a generous world, then you know, and people know how to give, and the giving is effective. Giving, generosity done right can change the world is my new mantra. So, be thinking through that, please. Yeah, where you were born, who your parents were, how healthy you were, how much education you received as a child, how much opportunity you have. And you have very little control over it.
Sometimes I can just, Steve, sometimes those conditions can actually encourage someone with a kind of a heart and a kind of a soul to become independent, to become self-sustaining. I made a personal choice that I wanted to become a parent, but along with that, chose to personally take care of those children and not depend on welfare to care for those children. That was a personal choice.
Yeah, that's great. And you know, there are certainly people that overcome these types of things. And I'm not saying that, you know, if you were in these situations, you're stuck. Because I know of people that, you know, were born to lousy parents in lousy areas and became very successful people. So I'm not discounting that. But I do just want people to think about this and not say, you know, hey, those people over there, they should just work harder. We'll talk about that next week specifically on the situation of people that are caught into this poverty trap. I don't want to give to this person because he will become dependent on charity. So there is a real problem here. You know, you remember the expression, give a man a fish? How does that end?
Eats for a day, teach him to fish.
Give a man a fish, you fed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, you fed him for a lifetime. Okay? I'm going to add a piece to that. Teach a man to beg for fish, and he'll be begging for a lifetime. Okay? If generosity done wrong can have an adverse effect, it can make the problem worse. We're going to assign a movie to you guys for next week. It's called Poverty Inc. And it's a movie that's available. It's on Netflix if you have Netflix or have a friend that has Netflix. It's on Amazon Video, although it's not free, but you know, it's worth the $3 investment. We have a couple of copies here if you want to check out a copy. But I encourage you to watch it either before next class or after next class, but over the coming 2 weeks. What Poverty Inc. looks into is, you know, how effective, you know, the Haiti earthquake was, 2010? And yet Haiti is worse off in some ways now than it was, even though all these organizations have come in and tried to solve the problem. And it's just a different way of looking at things. It is at times a little bit way off to the edge. You know, like people saying, we don't want you to come and help us, period. You know, we just want to figure it out ourselves. And, you know, I think that's a bit extreme on the other side. But I'll give you a hint. If the government comes along and every week shows up with a plane load full of rice, okay, what's the good benefit of that? Some people get to eat. Okay, what's the bad benefit of that? Okay, the rice farmer is out of business. Okay, you've just increased unemployment if you don't do it right. You know, the nations that become dependent on food from other countries, agriculture, even though it's available, disappears because they can't compete against free. So it's a tougher problem than you might think. So entitlement is this idea that I deserve. And so we just talked about entitlement from the sense of a wage earner saying, I deserve to keep my money. But entitlement is a big thing in the world right now of saying, and it's done in the sort of light of human rights. Everybody deserves to be able to eat. Everybody deserves free health care. Everybody deserves to not starve to death. And, you know, while that sounds good, you have to figure out how that's applied. Because if we say everybody deserves that, then how is it provided? And you end up with this giant communist society. It's interesting that they've used the word entitlement for Social Security and Medicare. And I'm going to talk about Social Security when we get to retirement. But you know, those came out of, well, all older people deserve to not be out on the street, which sounds okay, except that they've totally messed up the program. So entitlement for the wealthy is the right to keep what I've earned. Entitlement for the poor is I shouldn't have to do it. I shouldn't have to work. I deserve to be able to eat. And so that's what we have to watch out for. I'm entitled to have all of my needs met for free. So are there any good entitlements? Yes. You're entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You're entitled to get paid if you work. You're entitled to choose how you spend your own money. You're entitled to choose your form of religion or your freedom of speech. Those are certainly good things when we use the word entitlement. But a lot of the others are pretty negative. So there's this guy that says all government-sponsored welfare programs are destined to fail. Instead of reducing poverty, they actually increase poverty. And that's what this Poverty Inc. Is all about. So what's wrong with saying that everybody deserves food, shelter, and health care?
Somebody on paper.
It looks good on paper, but if you say everyone deserves it and it's up to the government to provide it, then you end up with a government program. If you say, yes, that's true, we don't want people starving to death or dying of preventable illnesses or things like that, this is where generosity done right comes into action. That person relies on generosity. But it should be the generosity of organizations whose missions are to help people out of whatever situation they're in, not just hand them stuff. People get lazy. There is a big problem in some African nations where there's this culture of laziness. So even when they come in and say, hey, we've created jobs, people don't want to work because they're so used to just going down and getting free stuff. People manipulate the system. I'm sure you've all heard of people that can go from organization to organization, take advantage of that organization until they get sent away and then go pick another organization. There's church hoppers that are famous for that. So what's the alternative? The alternative is restricting, so we don't want to teach a man how to beg. We want to restrict entitlement to the people that are incapable. And we need to work with the people that are capable in giving them opportunity. So rely on the generosities of individuals and charities, which can apply proper percentage incentives, help people change their situation. That's our proposed thing for you to think about. Paul in the Bible is saying, when we were with you, we would give you this command: if anyone is not willing to work, that person should not eat. For we hear that among you are people walk in idleness and not busy at work, but busybodies. Such person we command and encourage them to do work quietly and to earn their own living. That's coming out of Thessalonians. There are people that are incapable. Those people that are entitled. All right, questions on that? Thoughts? Disagreements? Anyone want to start a fight? I don't present these slides as this is the only answer. I present these slides as things to get you thinking. So I want this to cause you to go back and think about some of this stuff and decide for yourself. There's almost nothing that we present that we decide are hard and fast rules. And we're not trying to convince you to do things our way or to think the way that's presented in these slides. But what we're trying to do is present things for you to think about that you'd never thought about before. And whether you conclude what we've concluded, is your business. We had a brief discussion early on percentages. We will never tell you that some percent is good, bad, or indifferent. So because people get into this thing, well, I can't afford to give 10%, so I'm just not going to give anything. None of that's good. So we want, as we'll get to this, we want to start somewhere and don't worry about what percentage it is, and do it in a way that's effective, in a way that's having an impact, and then figure out how to do a little bit more. And again, remember we didn't use the word sacrifice in our definition because if you can get to the point where you're actually enjoying it, then it's not really a sacrifice. Because sacrifice to me has this sort of negative, it's causing me pain to do it. But I know a man who gives 90% of his income, and he does perfectly fine living on the 10%. He doesn't think of it as sacrificial. He just likes to see. He just feels like that's part of his gifting. So I'm not going to ever ask you your percentages or imply that I'm judging anybody on their percentages. So throw that out there. Comments or questions? Any objections that you want to talk about that we didn't cover? Obviously, if you haven't found an organization that's worthy, then that's why you're here. And hopefully, over the next 2 weeks, you'll found that. And if somebody comes to you with that, you will have the tools to say, you know what, let's sit down and look at GuideStar and see if we can find an organization that's worthy. So, cool. All right, well, I'll let you guys go. There'll be weeks when we go all the way to the end, but I'm happy with the amount of conversation and the amount of thought that you guys have put into this. So we'll call it a day, and I'll send you guys those video references after the Thursday class is done, so that I don't want to confuse the people that are taking the Thursday class. So you'll hear from me Friday or Saturday. All right?
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thanks a lot. Good day.